Man, that was a pretty good meeting. So the boss wants us to have MFA set up on the VPN. Okay, it shouldn't be too big of a deal. We got a FortiGate Firewall, right? So it shouldn't take too long. Let me see on how much, we need to have those tokens. How much is one token? What? If one token costs that, how much are we gonna have to pay? Wow, he's not gonna be happy with that. You know what? I got a better idea. Why don't we use Azure Authentication, since they're an identity service provider, and then with that service provider, we can have it authenticate our VPN, and then turn on Per-User MFA. And at that point, our requirements are met. They save money. I get a central spot I can manage all this, so if we have multiple sites or whatever, it'll make it a lot easier. And it'd be a good segue to our sponsor. Oh, I forgot we don't have any sponsors. So if this sounds like fun to you and something that would be entertaining for you, stay tuned to find out how we can get this set up.
Oh, it's black burning tech, we're leveling up. From networking paths to systems we trust. Let's break it down, let's build it back. Together we're learning, right on track.
Hey, what's going on? Brian here with Blackburn and Tech. And yeah, that first intro was definitely a little bit dramatic, but it's something many businesses face and they struggle with. Is a lot of places want to have MFA, want to have central authentication, but it does get expensive. Having a central point to authenticate against is definitely a lot more convenient. Say you have multiple sites, you want one central spot to authenticate off of. It's so much easier. In this demonstration we're going to do, we have a LDAP server that's synchronizing with Azure, but you don't have to have that. You can technically start with just a free Azure subscription, build it out, and do the same thing. So this video is going to be a little bit longer than our typical videos, so link down in the descriptions. I'm going to put the timestamps in because, like I said, this one's going to be a little bit longer than my typical videos. But what I want to do is, first things first, let's start where we are now, see what kind of environment we have, the challenges we face, and then I want to go to where do we want to go, and then let's go through the implementation phase of it, and then of course testing, and then we can gradually have our users start using that. So let's go ahead and have you guys join me over on my computer and start figuring out where we are currently.
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with your environment, so I can't really guide you on this, but the chances are either you have local accounts or you have some form of central authentication server. With that being said, if you have local accounts, it works fine. So if you have a few users, normally not that big of a deal, but if you start spreading out into multiple sites or you have additional complexity because your user base keeps growing, this could definitely be challenging and also add a little more resources on the box itself. The other common one that you'll typically see is a domain controller or an LDAP server of some sort. For example, I have a domain controller and from here, you have a central spot to manage your users for your authentication. So if you're logging into workstations or accessing network shares or whatever, this could be a good spot to manage it. But this isn't really well for cloud environments. The most common thing is to turn this into a hybrid environment. So with this, we can install a program such as Azure Active Directory or AD Connect, whatever they choose to call it now. Microsoft's notorious for changing naming conventions on us. We'll synchronize our domain environment that we have here on this domain controller and synchronize it up into Azure. Now, let's say if you're a small business and you don't have an Active Directory server, can this still apply to you? Absolutely. From here, we would just create a tenant within Azure and create users based in the cloud. And at this point, your users themselves would be cloud users, so you wouldn't have a need for a local on-premises domain controller. Another flexible option is maybe you have vendors that are coming in and accessing your VPN and you want to restrict them down on particular areas. By doing it this way, if they already have an Azure environment, a lot of companies nowadays do, so maybe you're reaching out and you're working with them, they can use their own login. They don't have to create a new password for your environment, but yet you also have the peace of mind going, okay, our services are no longer native with this organization, you can separate it out a little bit easier too. You're essentially allowing guest access into your environment. So it comes down to what is best for your solution. Like I said, unfortunately, I don't know your business environment and how you already have it. If you already have domain controllers, yeah, why not go ahead and synchronize it up into Azure so that way you make a change on premises, it works. Or if you don't have it, do we want to create authentication directly in the cloud? That could definitely be a viable option. It comes down to what is best for what is your needs. What does your organization need? Does it need to have this domain controller or not? Some environments works great just to have it up in the cloud, so you don't have to worry about anything on premises. If you already have a Microsoft Office 365 license subscription, you can use some of those accounts and just have a central spot for this too. This definitely can go a lot more in depth. I don't really want to make this video too long about all the other ways you can build this out, but simply put, if you have Azure Active Directory, you can either build it out as a standalone device, or if you have an on-premises Active Directory, you can use programs like AD Connect to synchronize up to the cloud. Okay, so over here in the lab, we can kind of see what we have going on. This is the domain controller that I currently have set up. I have Active Directory installed on it, and I do have some users, so if I go ahead and pull this open, you can see that I got a couple of users in here. Bob Test. And it's just a generic domain. There's nothing fancy going on here. So the only difference is my domain controller, I do have this Azure AD Connect. I know they renamed the thing, but it's what they had available for it. This application essentially is what it does is this synchronizes your on-premises Active Directory up to Azure and puts it into that environment. So from a domain controller perspective, this is not very complicated. There's just this user and there's a few different things that I have set up in here, but it really isn't calling any of this. It's overall a basic domain. There's a couple different devices in it, but essentially there's just the users. So let's go ahead and jump over on the Azure side and take a look at this. Okay, so pulled up on the Azure side. So if we come over here to Entra ID, this is Microsoft Entra ID. It used to be Azure AD, but they changed it. It's right here. If you don't have it right there, you can come up in the search box and look for it. But when you get to it, it will show something like this. This is your overall basic view, and then all your users, since you're synchronizing, should show up here. And this is pretty much all we need. All these users right here is all we'll need to set this up. So what we'll need to do is go and create a Microsoft Enterprise application or an enterprise application, as you can see right here. And this is what we'll do is we'll create this and then we'll have it using SAML authentication. So it sounds very complicated and convoluted. It's really straightforward. So we'll just go ahead and click on it. As you can see, I currently already have one. I'm just going to create a separate one. This is for my Lab for Fun domain that I already have. And we'll just come up here and create the new one. And you can see you can have it use SAML for all sorts of different applications. So if you have any of these applications, and there's a bunch of others you can add to it. I did see where you can create your own application. That's definitely a little more advanced. But for what mine is I have a FortiGate Firewall. So right here we can see if you have like a FortiWeb or any of these other products, you can use that. But we're concerned about is the SSL VPN. So we'll go ahead and click on this. Come over here. We can see a little bit about it and who creates it. We want to make sure that it's owned by who we want. And so I'm going to call this lab demo. And we'll go ahead and click create. So essentially we're creating that application right now in our Azure environment. If you don't already have an Azure environment, go ahead and create one. It's free to create. You do have to put in a credit card. They do have a free tier that gives you some time to play with stuff, but this right here is a free product. All right, so from here, pretty straightforward on what we're going to do. Again, it gives us a little walkthrough, and you could do it a little bit differently if you want, but you would come over here to assign users and groups. So if I click on this, there's no users in here, but we click on add users and groups. And you'll get this warning right here. Groups are not allowed within my current structure because I don't have a P1 or P2 license, which if you're not familiar with it, that's the licensing for Azure Entra ID. I don't have one. I only have my own users. So I can come over here and just put a user in it directly. So if I want Bob to be able to log into this as Bob test account, I can click this, one user selected, and assign it. So Bob Test is now assigned to this application. And then he is assigned as a user. He doesn't have any special permissions or anything. But now we need to go ahead and get some of the information set up in order to build this out. So right below there is this box that says single sign-on. We'll go ahead and click on that. As we can see, it's currently disabled. And now you can use some other different methods. So if you do want to like link it but we're going to do a SAML authentication. So we'll go ahead and click on SAML. And now that that's loaded, and you can see where it says required. This right here is the information that we need to fill out. Let me go ahead and zoom out. Okay, so what information do we put here? We'll need to come up here, and we could use their documentation. They were nice enough to already have some of this for us, since it is a very popular solution. We can go ahead and scroll down, since we've already done the majority of this. So what we need for this information is on the setup page on single sign-on, you'll put your FortiGate IP or your FQDN address. So like if you have vpn.labforfun or vpn.whatyours is or remote work or whatever your web extension is. You could also put in the IP address if you have a public IP address. Typically, it's best to put in a DNS name for it. And if you need help with that, you should jump over on our DNS video. And if you also want additional like public hosting DNSs, we can definitely take a look at that too. So let's go ahead, and what I normally do is I copy this over to a notepad so you don't have to watch me type. So what I have is I typically comment this and just copy it over to a notepad. Let me pull this over on this screen for you. So in my example here, we're using vpn.labforfun, and I have a custom port set up, so it's 8443. So these are my custom port numbers. You'd put yours appropriately if you have a custom port. If you don't, it will just go to 443 by default. And then we'll just come back over here and fill in the appropriate boxes. Just click on this Edit tab, scroll down, and then fill in the appropriate boxes. Okay, so I went ahead and paused that for a sec so you didn't have to watch me copy and paste. But we went ahead and put in the information it says, so the identifier ID, the sign-on ID, the relay, and the sign-out. So from here, we would just come up and click Save. Okay, and my guess is it won't let me save this because I already have this information used somewhere else in my environment. So let's just jump over into that one. So I'll click on this. Okay, that's fine. And we'll jump over into the other application we have. And we'll click on Single Sign-On. And it'll take us to here. Since I already have this information placed in here, I'm pretty sure that's what it was complaining about. So you shouldn't have run into that issue, but just fill that out. And then if you scroll down, you'll see where there's these certs in this SAML certificate and configurations. What you'll want to do is right here where it says Federation Metadata XML, you'll want to download that. So what that does is that helps it build the connection to Azure in a secure environment. Okay, in order for this to work, we also have to have the attributes set up so that way, because FortiGate is going to expect their own particular naming and everything else. So if we come over to their documentation, we can see this here. That's what they're talking about is you want to make sure you add these in. So like the username and then the source attribute is user.principal. To do this, we click on back over in our Azure portal, click on Edit, and then we can add a new chain and go ahead and put them in. As you can see, I already have them added here, but you would add yours in here as appropriately as well. All right, in order to do this, we'll go ahead and click on Add New Chain. And then here you can give it the name. So for example, if we come back up and use their example for username, and we'll just copy this over. And then leave this URI alone, this space alone. Come over here and copy the source. And then you'd click on right here and paste it in. It won't let me do it because I already have this one in. But you'd come over here and then do this and then add it in additionally. and then you come up and click save. But since I already have this one, it won't let me do that. All right, in order to go back, just click the back button, and then you should see your chain right here. And that's the same spot we would enter in for our group chain as well. So if you haven't done so already, you would go ahead and click back. And then here's where we'd scroll down, and what we're looking for is the certificate that's right here. This is the certificate for it. We'll go ahead and download this certificate. And then we'll need that in order to apply it to the firewall so it can build the SAML authentication. And from their documentation, from here, you would go ahead and create a test user. And this is this process of how you can do it. You would create the user within side of the cloud. If you're not already synchronizing with your LDAP server, it would do that. You can also still do it if you want, and it would just be a cloud account versus a local account. But since we already have a couple of users we can test with from our on-premises Active Directory, we don't have to worry about that. But if you wanted to add a user in, we would go ahead and click Home, and then we'll go ahead and go over to our Entra ID, Users, then create a new user. You can create a new user, or you can invite one. So if somebody else already has like a Microsoft 365 account for like their business or something, you can invite them in as a guest. But come over and click Create Account, fill in the required information, and you'll have that account. I'm not going to do it for this video, but this is where you do that. But the main thing to remember is when you do add them in, you would need to make them a user within the VPN, within the application itself. So it would be under the Enterprise Applications, and then go ahead and click on it. And then we would come over to Users and Groups, and here's where we should see our user that we have for our test account. Okay, so this is the Azure side of it. And then now we have to work on setting up it on the FortiGate in order to allow it. So when we go to do that, we need to allow the SAML authentication, go through that process. But we also have to create firewall rules the same as we would for setting up any other VPN. Hang on a second, we'll jump over into that section. Okay, so now we need to go ahead and add to our firewall the certificate that we exported. So I'm already logged in here. And as you can see, to get to it, we'll go ahead and click on System, come down to Certificates. If you don't see this, turn on go over to Feature Visibility and turn on Certificates, and then you'll be able to get to this tab. From here, we'll go ahead and click on Create Import, and this is where it'll be different compared to traditional processes. We're going to import a remote certificate. Go ahead and click on Upload, and from here, we'll go ahead and click on our certificate and go ahead and click OK. All right, when that's done, you should be able to scroll down and you should see it down here. So it'll show you the Microsoft cert is right here in the bottom corner for you. So the next step is to configure the VPN SAML authentication or single sign-on authentication. Okay, from here we need to go ahead and connect our Azure authentication into our firewall, and then we can apply it to our VPN. So let's go under Users and Authentication. And then right here in the corner, you'll see single sign-on. Go ahead and click on it. I went ahead and took their liberty to fill this out for you so you guys didn't have to watch my awesome typing skills. But let's go ahead and double click on it and let's go ahead and run through it. So from here, we can see that this is using the firewall's address and the same information that we copied over on the cert or on the Azure side of it. So we basically took that and put it in here. So all the stuff that we had copied over on our notepad should be listed here. Scrolling down a little bit, you'll see where it says Identity Provider Configuration. We're going to do Other because we're not connecting to a Fortinet product. And then these right here is the information that it gives you at the bottom of your application. So if we jump back over on the application itself and go under Single Sign-On, if you're wondering where I got this from, scroll all the way to the bottom. Right here is our login, our Microsoft Entra, and log out right here. So we copied that over. And then from here, I would make sure that where it says certificate, you use the certificate that you acquired from Microsoft. This is how it's going to verify that it has permissions and that's the right one. So we'll go ahead and put that in here, as you can see. And then coming down a little bit further, you'll see what the attribute users for users and groups. So those ones that we created in the cloud earlier, this is the URL that it created for it. So if you don't remember doing this, it's when you scroll back up over here and click on this, edit, So this user print.principal name was the one we needed to have. So if we double click on this, all right, so now that it finally loaded, this right here is the address that it gave us. This is its unique address, and then that's what we put in over here. So we did this for the user identity and the group identity. Those two ones we built out, we'll need those information, and then we'll just go ahead and click OK. Okay, and to finish building this out, it is the same as doing it for any additional VPN. Now, I currently have mine set up to use the web portal, which I know most of you guys are saying, Brian, that's insane, don't do that. I have it set up so whenever I test it out, I can do it, but I do recommend switching it back to like a tunnel all. So it's only using the tunnels, not the web application part of it. So to do that, if you're not familiar, go ahead and click on Settings, then go ahead and click on VPN. So from the user side, so I created a new user group called Azure Remote, and if you come up here and click on it, my user group has under remote groups, it has our Azure object here. So if I click on edit, it will take us to our Azure object that we have. So in order to do that, you just create a group, come in down here to add objects. If you already have additional ones, like if you have an LDAP server, it'll have it listed here as well. And then you go ahead and click on it, click OK. And so now you have that group. And this is where you'll lock that down on the VPN. So when you lock this down on the VPN, it'll be locked down to that group. For example, mine might be a little bit more wider open because I'm in the middle of testing it, but it will be changed soon. So if you're not familiar with setting up a SSL VPN on FortiGate, you go under VPN profiles. You can have multiple profiles. I currently have mine for full access for this demonstration. And then I will come over here and click on settings. And then I'll scroll down. See, and so what we're doing is 192.168, this subnet, host allowed to connect, and anyone in the US, my timeout, my DNS servers. So down here I have my Azure Remote. I created a new one for the user group here. I went ahead and click create, and then which users and groups. So if I come over here, I can click on my Azure Remote, and then I went ahead and assigned it to that portal, which was my full access portal. And then all other users. So if you're not part of my Azure group, all other users and groups will be allowed to my full access. For best practices, as you can see with their big sign there, that you probably shouldn't use the web portal. Apparently it has some sort of issues with it. So here in a little bit, I'll change that back down. But once you have this done, you actually just change your VPN to authenticate using Azure Authentication instead of your local LDAP server or any other. So if you create a user account or you invite someone in, it will let you go to there. Let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll go ahead and demonstrate this and make sure it works. All right, now here's the fun part, in my opinion, is the testing time where we can build this out and actually make sure it works, that our configuration is good. So from here, I'm going to open up an incognito. The reason why I left that open is for the web browser one, is it's easier to troubleshoot and test, in my opinion. I could use the other one, but since I'm on the same network, I'm not trying to do all that. So go ahead and I'm going to open up an incognito tab so it doesn't have my information already. And we have a Bob test account. I'm not sure if you guys remember that. So let me come back over. I think, yeah, we got a Bob test account. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and log in as Bob. Now, Bob doesn't have permissions to this application as of yet. So when we go to our VPN, it should redirect us over to Microsoft Authentication. So if we go ahead and do this, vpn.lab4fun.org, and remember we moved it to a separate port, so 10.4.4.3. Oops, I'm typing too much. So 10.4.4.3. It should redirect, and it's taking us to the Lab4Fun authentication page, which that's a good thing. So let's go ahead and log on as Bob at lab4fun.org. And we'll enter in Bob's password. And we get this. This is a great message. This is what we want to see, because we don't want everybody just to be able to be in there. So Your administrator has configured the application for Lab for Fun SSL VPN, and it gives you the information there to block if you're not part of a particular group or assigned. I don't have Bob assigned currently, so Bob is denied his permissions into here. But that's an easy fix. So if Bob calls me and says, hey, I need access to the VPN, so I can come over here to Enterprise Applications, and we'll go ahead and use the, go ahead and click on it. And from here, this is where we would already have them assigned. Typically, you would synchronize like a group with your LDAP, but we don't have that currently set up. So we'll come over here to Users and Groups, and I will click Add Users. Since I am on the free tier, I can't do the group, but that's fine. But we're going to search for Bob. And there's Bob Test. Go ahead and select Bob Test. And then click Assign. So Bob Test now has access to this application. So if we try again, Bob should be able to log into the SSL VPN portal. So let's go ahead and try that again. So vpn.labforfun.org:10443. And we're back to our login prompt. Bob at labforfun.org. And Bob is logged in. And when we go ahead and sign out, we can log Bob out. And Bob was no longer part of the VPN. So this is using authentication using Azure. It doesn't have any LDAP server set up, but this is only half the battle. We wanted to make sure that Bob has MFA set up because maybe it's mandated or we just want to do it. So what we need to do is go back over into our Entra ID. Go ahead and click on Home. Go back to our Entra ID and Users. And this will give us all of our users. But up at the top, you have this Per-User MFA. Go ahead and click on that. And here's where you can add users in. So you can already, if you already have them, you'll see all your users synced here. I currently have Bob's disabled, but if I click on Bob, I can enable it and turn it on. So he's forced, it has an option. That's the big catch. He has the option now to use the VPN and has the option for MFA. But maybe I want to force Bob to no matter what. So I can click on it, and this is where that enforce one is. You want to make sure it's darkened like that, because if it's not darkened, they have the option to have VPN and have MFA, but we want to enforce it. Another good thing is, say if Bob loses his phone or whatever, and I need to go in and delete it so he can get back in and all this, we can click on the user settings here and come over here in the corner. Require selected users to provide additional contact information. So if he needs to reset up his phone, it'll force him to do that. Delete all app and existing passwords from the particular user. So this was if they have like an app password, they would delete that. And then this bottom one is if it's part of a device that's hosted and synchronized with Azure. That's definitely a little outside the scope of this course. But by turning this on, if Bob tried to log back in on this VPN, it would prompt him for MFA or ask him for his MFA. So let's go ahead and try it again. All right, we redirected successfully. And now it's asking, since Bob already has MFA set up, it's asking for his MFA code. And then this is where you could go into the actual troubleshooting with the Microsoft Authenticator side of it. If you needed you needed to reset his password or reset his MFA, we could have done that back there in the portal. But this is where I would be stopped because I don't have Bob's MFA. So with all that said, hopefully this has been informative for you, and thank you for watching. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and click a like and a subscribe. Would definitely help the channel. The more views would definitely help the channel, and I appreciate every single one of you for viewing. If you did not like this content, go ahead and give a thumbs down, and if you wouldn't mind, give a description why. If you have any additional ideas or video content suggestions, I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, thank you, and thank you for your time.